Yo, what's going on, YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte. So today we're continuing to crank out our season preview videos. Today we're heading up back to the Metropolitan Division, staying in the state of Pittsburgh. I cannot believe I just said that. We're staying in the Keystone State in Pennsylvania, looking at the Pittsburgh Penguins. Jesus, you guys are going to roast me for that. So with that out of the way, let's take a look at the Pittsburgh Penguins. So, not a ton of changes to the Penguins this season. Riley Smith left the team. He ends up getting traded to the Rangers. They bring in Rutger McGroarty from Winnipeg. They bring in Blake Lizotte, Kevin Hayes up front, Matt Grzelcyk and Sebastian Aho on defense. And goaltending is going to stay similar to what we saw last year. So, some of the changes here, is this patchwork enough for the Penguins to get back into the playoffs? They missed the playoffs for 2 consecutive seasons. That's the first time ever in the Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin era that this team has missed the playoffs. Now 2 years in a row. Never happened. So for the Penguins, they're going to look to break that this year and keep this window open with Malkin, Crosby, and Letang. So looking at the top 6, you got Raquel, Crosby, and Rust, Michael Bunting, Evgeny Malkin, and bringing in Rutger McGroarty. So we'll see how he does here in his stint with Pittsburgh. Hopefully it's a long one. Because I think there's a lot of potential with Rutger McGroarty. There's a guy that has high expectations of himself. He demands a lot of ice time and things like that. Pittsburgh's dealt with these kind of players before. You remember the Phil Kessel era and things like that. Like, this does happen. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see a situation where McGroarty does get a little bit of a leash here, and we'll see how Mike Sullivan kind of plays into that. You got Cody Glass and Kevin Hayes alongside Drew O'Connor. I'm really excited for that line because I really like Cody Glass and Drew O'Connor, and I think those are good players overall. Maybe Cody Glass isn't going to be a superstar, but he's probably going to be a pretty good player. So I'm excited to see that. And obviously Kevin Hayes had a down season last year. Hopefully he's able to rebuild his game in Pittsburgh. There aren't many better places to do it than in Pittsburgh. And that really adds a lot of depth to that center core. I think that's a really good pickup there. And then you've got Achari, Eller, and Lizotte on the 4th line. Honestly, pretty solid. Can't really say much about that. Defense, you got Pettersson and Carlson as your top pair. Ryan Graves and Chris Letang as your second pair. Again, I would say that's pretty solid. Again, it's not great by any means, but it's solid. It works. So for the Pittsburgh Penguins right now, I think, again, maybe not a ton of depth there. Sorry about that, guys. But this is a situation for Pittsburgh where you're probably looking at a team. Now I'm distracted. People texting me. Sorry, guys. That defense pretty much stayed the same. And then the third pair, you've got Grzelcyk and Aho. So Matt Grzelcyk comes in. I know, he spent so much of his career in Boston. It's weird to see him in black and gold, but not playing for the Bruins. So we'll see how he does this year. I think that's a good pickup. Sebastian Aho is hit or miss. I think I saw him a lot playing with the New York Islanders as my team. I would say he's a good pickup. But for Pittsburgh, I don't know if I would be comfortable with him as a legit mainstay on the third pair. Like, I think he's a good 7th defenseman that when there's injuries and, he's going to spend most of the season on the scratch pad. I think it's a good thing for him to prove that he is a legitimate defenseman. But from what I've seen from him over a couple years with the Islanders, he frustrates you. He's a little bit of a turnover machine. And I think that's something that Penguins fans probably aren't going to love because they already have guys like that in Letang and Carlson. But I think Grzelcyk here is really the kind of the equalizer. I think he's a really good guy to play along. And you see this with all of Sullivan's lines here because Pettersson, Graves, and Grzelcyk all on the left side, more of the lockdown, defensive-minded guy. And then Carlson, Letang, and Aho are the fast-skating, puck-moving defensemen. That's kind of what you're getting here with that dynamic between Aho and Grzelcyk. Goaltending, staying the same. You got Jari and Nedeljkovic. I'm a fan of that. I think they did pretty well last season. And again, they definitely had their stretches where things didn't go well, but also it just seemed like a little bit of a just overall for the Penguins as a team, things just weren't going well for them. And I think that's going to get better this year. I look at this team too. You look at some of the guys that they added that aren't in the lineup. Guys like Anthony Beauvillier could jump into this lineup too. Since the McGroarty situation, I don't know where Bo really fits in, but Anthony Beauvillier could come in and be a good player for them as well when the time is needed. And I think this team has a lot more depth than they did last year, even losing guys like O'Reilly Smith. This team they're trying to hang on, right? Like we know what they're doing here. They're kind of staving off the rebuild. They don't want to trade guys like Crosby, Malkin, Letang. I totally get it, but I don't know if they have enough. And the goaltending isn't like spectacular. It isn't phenomenal, and I think that it's going to be kind of another year of mediocrity for the Penguins. And I hate to say that, because I know that's not what you want to hear in the twilights of Malkin and Crosby's career, but how much more can Crosby give? Like, Malkin's numbers have continued to fall off, and I don't think at this point in his career he's just going to be able to flip it back on. I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're going to need to rely a lot more on the depth. Like I said, guys like Kevin Hayes, Drew O'Connor, Michael Bunting, Rutger McGroarty could be huge for them and add that jolt of energy back to the Malkin line that they need. But you're asking for a lot. A guy hasn't played an NHL game yet. So I wish I could be a little bit more positive here for my Penguins fans. And I've said this with a lot of teams in the East, because you have to look at the perspective, right? Like, there's about 6 teams that are like the middle of the pack right now in the Atlantic and Metropolitan Division. And unfortunately, the Penguins are one of those teams where I don't know, like, the reality is 1 or 2 of them is going to be good enough to make the playoffs, but how do I predict that right now? Like, it's hard for me to do that. So it's basically just off of gut and what I think, but, like, it's hard to predict that. Like, experts will not be able to predict this properly. So I have the Penguins missing the playoffs. They're going to finish with 86 points, so they'll do better than the Flyers. You have that going for you, so you could still say the Flyers suck. You'll be ahead of them in the standings. But the reality is, I think that 86 points is fair. I'm not super sold on the goaltending. I like the additions they made, but, like, is it really going to be the difference that puts them over some of these other teams to get in? And it takes a lot of hubris to sit here and say, yeah, we have enough and we're going to be the 1 or 2 out of 6 to 8 teams that's going to realistically get in. It's asking for a lot. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Do you think it'll be the 3-year skid for the Penguins where they miss the playoffs now? Or do you think they jump back into the playoffs? And the reality is, I think for Penguins fans, it's like, yeah, so even if we do make the playoffs, is it going to be like we had those last 2 years against the Rangers where we're basically down 3-0 and fighting for our way in? Or, like, where is this even going to take us? Because if we're just going to get bounced in the first round of the playoffs and beat, does it even matter if we make the playoffs? I think a lot of Penguins fans are kind of there too. So let me know what you think down below. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again in the next video. Peace out, guys.